a chance during vacation since my kid's apartment didn't have television or cable, but he did have Netflix. So I watched all of that quarterback show with Cousins and Mariota, and maybe most importantly Mahomes. And I don't know, I just feel really good about what Trey Lance got done with Jeff Christensen. Christensen is maintaining that we are going to see a different version of Trey Lance in training camp this year than we saw a year ago. And I kind of think he's going to be right about that, simply because what Trey reminded me of in minicamp was a lot of what Brock reminded me of in minicamp a year ago. He mastered every drill. He seemed totally calm. He's in tune with his receivers. He knows the tendencies of his receivers. And I see a more comfortable, a calmer, a more knowledgeable, a better mechanically driven Trey Lance. And I see Trey as quite a bit improved, and I think we're on the verge of seeing it. What do you guys think? Is that too pie in the sky, too glowing, too positive to start?
I don't think so. But I'm going to bring it down a level just because I think the most important part of the quarterback show is everybody falling in love with Kirk Cousins, 49er quarterback. I'm only half joking, but
it's funny, Jesse. I went the other way. I looked at that show, and my takeaway was this guy's old. This guy's broken down. I knew Kirk Cousins was a good dude. I've interviewed him a couple times. He's a great guy. Nobody's ever told me any. I knew he was a good guy, but to me, when he was openly whimpering in that Buffalo game, and it's like, who am I to make fun of him? I'm sitting here in a very comfy, cozy studio. Nobody's hitting me, but to me, my takeaway from Cousins' portion is good guy, but his body is starting to be beat up, and if the Niners have to go to him in the future, that will be a bad, bad thing.
Dude, you might go viral tonight because of that sound.
Yeah, somebody's definitely clipping that one up. No doubt about it. We need you on Twitter. Whoever, somebody clip that up. It's going to be good. But yeah, I half joke, but I do know that there is still a love affair with Kyle Shanahan and Kirk Cousins. Let's hope that one of these two quarterbacks between Brock Purdy and Trey Lance, one of them shows out and becomes the guy. So we don't even have to talk about Kirk Cousins next offseason. That being said, you talked about Trey Lance and Jeff Christensen.
Right.
What really sold me, and I don't know if you were able to catch this, Larry. I'm not posting on Twitter really, so you may not have came across it on my channel, but there was a Dallas Cowboy content creator, huge Dallas Cowboy content creator, by the way, goes by Law Nation, has a ton of subs, kills it with the Cowboys content. But he was at a sports event, and at this sports event, he's interviewing a quarterback / wide receiver trainer. And this gentleman's very plugged in. His best friend is an NFL player. Talked about that. And they asked him at the tail end of the interview, they were asking him a lot about Dak Prescott because he's worked with Dak Prescott. He's worked with Patrick Mahomes as well. And at the very end, they said something about accuracy and can it be fixed? And he basically shut down the whole interview and goes, oh, yeah, my guy, Jeff Christensen, is the best in the world. You absolutely, if you work with him, you can fix everything. In fact, let me tell you about Trey Lance and the 40-day transformation I've seen from him. Completely different player. And that's basically where the interview ends. Good news is, I know Law Nation's brother, his twin brother. And he told me behind the scenes that Law Nation and that gentleman continued to talk to each other off camera. And he couldn't stop talking about how well Trey Lance was playing in those whatever, closed scrimmages, things that they were doing, closed throwing sessions. And he said, I'm not calling him Patrick Mahomes, certainly not doing that. But every throw that Patrick made, Trey Lance can do it also. And I'm very excited about his future. So take that for what it's worth. But this is somebody that is working with Mahomes, working with Dak, knows Jeff Christensen, was on a Dallas Cowboy channel and went out of his way to praise Trey Lance. So that got me excited.
I'm more excited, and maybe I'm more excited about Mahomes. The fact that after watching the quarterback thing on Netflix, just getting a glimpse into what a great competitor Mahomes is. What a it's like I felt like last summer, guys, watching Trey, he tried to make every throw that he made in camp out of the same arm angle. And it's like, I'm throwing the way I throw. But in reality, when you get in the game, you might have to flip it. You might have to backhand it. You might have to shovel pass it. You may have to sidearm it. And it really comes down to not just your throwing motion, but just you got to do whatever it freaking takes to move the chains. It's the NFL. And it's not going to go according to plan. It's going to be, you're going to have to go off schedule. The entire thing is what you do off schedule as a quarterback. And I just think that being around Mahomes and that mindset of, you know what, we're getting it done any way it has to get done, I think is where I want to see Trey mentally. Is like, he's got enough here and he's got enough here. It's not about smarts or arm strength or mechanics. To me, it's about resourcefulness and just do whatever you need to do to keep your team on the field, to extend drives. If that means you dodge two defenders and dive head first, then you dodge two defenders and you dive head first. I don't want to see, the same motion and, I just throw it the same way and it got tipped. He had more passes tipped than Purdy, and he's a bigger guy. So I want to see him just, I know we used to have, when I played basketball in high school, it was like, learn it. We had a coach who was like, learn it, memorize it, and forget it. In other words, we have sets, we have plays, we want to run our sets, but we're not beholden to our sets. Let's play basketball, right? And let's not forget that playing basketball supersedes whatever our play call was. So it's not about running the play or carrying out the play or whatever. It's about do whatever you need to do to complete the pass, make the play, pick up the yards, get the first, get the touchdowns. And I think that's what defines Mahomes. And if any of that rubs off on Trey, I think that's what I'm hoping. That's my big hope for the whole triumvirate of. I'm not saying that Christensen's not valuable. I think he is, but I think being around Mahomes is just as valuable. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I don't know. I've seen a lot of, I remember when Solomon Thomas worked out with Aaron Donald before the 2019 offseason, right? And they both posted that picture. And Aaron Donald looked as shredded as can be, and Solomon Thomas's body looked really good. And people were like, oh, look, because Aaron Donald at that point, I think, was coming off of 2 straight Defensive Player of the Years. And people were like, oh, look, this is one of the greatest defensive tackles ever. Like, this is going to rub off on Solomon Thomas. Solomon Thomas proceeded to be a backup player for the entirety of that season. I don't want to compare Trey Lance and Solomon Thomas, but I bring that example to say that I've seen this kind of pattern every offseason with a variety of different players where I know better, I guess. I don't know better, but I guess I find it difficult to become very excited and enthusiastic until I get to visualize it. Luckily for you guys will see it much earlier than me. My first look at it will be in preseason. You guys are going to be watching it all through training camp, but I need that visual confirmation. Now, in regard to your earlier point, I do think Trey Lance, there's going to be growth. There's going to be a difference, right? We've already seen the start of that this offseason. Larry, you were at camp. There were a lot of variety of different people at camp who've already mentioned that, a lot of his setup on how he's throwing the ball looks different, right? But I think even with that, I think that there's growing pains that he needs to do while playing that aren't just going to be skipped. And that's where I think sometimes the conversation of his improvement gets a little bit confusing for me. Because I think even though he's improved and I think he's going to be a better player, I don't doubt both of those things. I still think he needs the time to play. Like, I don't think that anything is going to be able to skip that part of his development, right? Mahomes is really the only quarterback that I can think of that just came in 1 year sat, and then the first year there was no growing pains. It was 50 touchdowns, 5,000 yards. And, you know, he might be the best quarterback we have ever seen. He might be the ultimate outlier here. But generally we see, you know, that's why, Larry, you bring up the different Hall of Famers that you've compared Trey Lance's initial statistical output to, right? Jesse, you talked about how you stuck by Josh Allen early when people were already writing him off because there was a growth that he needed to go through. And I think Trey Lance, you know, can improve his fundamentals, and that will facilitate a mechanical improvement and make him a better player. But at the same time, I think we were talking about the rawest quarterback ever when we were talking about him coming out of college. And 3 years of not playing in the NFL, as good as he can become at his fundamentals, and I don't doubt that he has worked so hard to improve and he's going to be a better player, I still don't think that that's going to be able to overcome the, like, I think that ultimately that experience factor in him not being able to play still stunts how much he can grow within even an off season, right? Because usually people grow from what they see and what they do, right? Like that first year gives them an idea of what they need to grow to into that second year. He hasn't even gotten his feet wet on what he can and can't do on an NFL field against NFL players week in and week out. He doesn't know what it's like to be 8 weeks into the year and his body's banged up and he has to play through all of that. Like, he hasn't been able to have any of those experiences because of injury. And as much as we keep talking about growth and development, it becomes difficult for me to talk about because I think he still needs, as much as he can grow at throwing and his fundamentals, he still needs to go through that entire full grind of a season as the starting quarterback so that he can get that experience, because he hasn't had that experience in 4 years. He's had it one time in 5 years.
I think that's a great point, Vish. You and I talked about this. I don't know if it was on camera or off camera when we did a show the other day, and I couldn't agree more. And I think all three 49er quarterbacks are a little bit behind the eight ball as far as growth for different reasons. Obviously, you broke down Trey Lance, and I think you did it beautifully, so I'm not going to rehash that. But Brock Purdy also hasn't really had an offseason.
Mm-hmm.
This is his first full offseason to be the guy and to take over. And the first offseason is not one where you're going to be learning a whole bunch as far as your full development, because you're going through a draft process. You're trying to make a team. It was a whole different thing that he went through. This offseason was supposed to take what was put on film, make those adjustments, make those improvements, and do that through repetition, work, what have you. And that was taken away from him because he's having to rehab. And then you've got Sam Darnold, who is the veteran of the group, but he hasn't been in the system. So he's trying to learn the system. So for one reason or another, all three quarterbacks have something working against them that I think early on, whoever starts may struggle because of that.